Welcome to It's a Grand Life. Did you know that in the United States alone, 2.4 million kids are being raised by their grandparents or other family members other than mom or dad? 2.4 million. It's a Grand Life is a podcast for those grandparents and kinship caregivers who are committed to making a difference for those kids. Grand families are in every neighborhood, every city, tribe, and territory nationwide. If this is you or someone you love, this podcast is for you. Our goal is to offer hope and resources to help you. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us wherever you get your audio podcasts and leave a review. Every new subscriber and review helps us reach others that need assistance. Welcome to another episode of It's a Grand Life. Hello, my name is Craig Nash, and I'd like to welcome you to another It's a Grand Life. And today you're absolutely going to be blessed. Our guest is Suzette Brown, and she's got an amazing organization called Each One, Teach One Together. And it's a commitment to the power of learning. She and I are also grand voices as part of the Generations United Network. And Suzette, we just welcome you to It's a Grand Life and just can't wait to hear more about your story.
Well, thank you, Craig. And it's a pleasure to be a part of It's a Grand Life. It's my pleasure to be here with you this morning.
Absolutely. We had some weather issues here in Michigan, but Lord willing, we're getting back to normal. But it's just great for Suzette and I to connect here. So tell us, there is a significance behind the title of your organization, Each One, Teach One Together. Where'd that come from? And what does that mean for your organization?
It's actually a biblical statement, each one teach one. If I'm not mistaken, it's 2 Timothy, I believe. But when I started, I was focusing on each one, teach one. And then when I got ready to go through the Secretary of State, there were plenty each one, teach ones. So what I did was the young lady, the Secretary of State said, okay, well, why don't you add something at the end? And so she helped me to think, and I said, what about together? Because one thing about each one, teach one, we learn from each other. And that was my whole philosophy about that, is to learn from each other, just like grand families or grand voices. Right. You know, none of us know everything.
That is absolutely true. So it's an African proverb, but it's also a biblical verse. Yes. That's what you're saying. Paul was talking to Timothy and right. said,
yeah. And it is an African symbol. It's an African language. It's an African focus. Each one, teach one. And it started back in slavery when the slaves were not allowed to read. But what happened was, as African Americans in slavery, they said what we would do is teach each other. So that's how each one teach one. And I'm glad you brought that up. Each one teach one. That's how that focused into the African American community, is we started teaching each other how to read back during slavery.
And from a biblical standpoint, it's about discipleship. You know, each one's got to teach someone in their walk. So it crosses over there. So, but what led you to start Each One, Teach One Together?
Well, one thing, when I was younger, I married my high school sweetheart, and I went through a tremendous divorce and had a mental health diagnosis, had one daughter, and my mother had to come forward to be my support. And she kept my daughter for 5-6 years. And in doing that, that's a part of kinship. So, and it wasn't that I was poor, and it wasn't that I was rich or anything. Status was not a part of it. It was the situation that brought me there. And so when I was looking and deciding, it just brought to kinship. Kinship would be something that is a passion of mine. I have a lived experience. I can really relate. Also, my husband and I adopted, and all of that is a part of it. And that's what sort of led me in that direction right now, is to go to kinship, because it could be any situation, it could be any circumstance, and it has nothing to do with your social background or anything. Right. It's a situation. It could be divorce. It could be anything. Right. So that's why I decided, and everything that I learned, I'm passing it on, but it's so much I'm learning from my family too, from my grandfamilies too.
And Suzette, not only is it a good idea. The outcomes for the kids, the statistics behind being a grand family or a kidship caregiver situation is really with us. The kids do really better, don't they?
They actually do better. Not saying that they're in the loving homes from others, but one thing I always say to my family is children will always love parent number one. Those are the parents that they are birthed. So if they're in a family, they have a greater high percentage of staying connected with their birth line. And that's what we want. We don't want nobody trying to hide where they came from, even if they were on drugs or whatever. We want to share with them and say, you don't have to walk down that same path. Let's see what path that we can direct you through. And that's what I did with my adopted children. But it's a possibility that the children want to be reconnected. And if so, they have an encyclopedia right there, the kinship family, to reconnect them. And to talk about history, talk about their parents. The good part about their parents. Oh, your mother, she was smart, she was intelligent, she was this, she just got, made mistakes, and that's why you're here. But we're going to pray for her. We're going to pray for her because we know she is a good-hearted person.
100%. And you're literally taking a page out of my wife and our playbook recently. We're dealing with talking about our granddaughter's mother to her and trying to keep it very positive, and because there's no need to drag folks through the mud, and there's some substance abuse issues and some behavioral health issues, but we're still hoping that the end of the story is way better than the middle of the story, and that's what we're praying for. But it's a fine line, because there's, with us anyway, Suzette, there's been some challenges with the chaos and the stress that comes with engaging with a family member who's on the wrong path. It can be stressful, can it, in the family situation?
It can be very stressful. But what I say to my families is, especially if you have custody of the children, is that don't use your power as a negative weapon. What you want to do is not dive into situations. My mother taught me that everything doesn't have to have a response. Everything doesn't have to be an altercation. And even with my granddaughter's mother, she goes through whatever she goes through. I give her space. I don't judge her, but I also let my granddaughter know it's not your fault that your mom is going through what she's going through. Because that's a biggie too when it comes to our grandchildren. And what they're going through, they have a tendency to want to blame themselves because their mother is not visiting them or not doing certain things. But therapy is very important. And now my granddaughter said, she said this Sunday, my mom said she was coming over Sunday. She didn't come. What else is new? And we just laughed about it and went on because we understand that that's just the person that she is. And it's nothing negative.
No, so you try to keep it really positive, and you don't need a response for everything. I think that's a great idea, and but I bet with all your experience that you can kind of sense with the kids when they're thinking about mom and something's, what there's a change in their behavior. Maybe they're sarcastic, maybe they're short or angry, and my wife and I are noticing that with our granddaughter, and it's like all we do is try and love this little girl, and we do love her. But sometimes she takes things out on us, probably because she misses her mom. Is that about right?
That is exactly correct. And kids are going to take things out on the people that are the person that is the closest to them because they don't have no other cushion. But that's where counseling comes in. And that's where the understanding as adults, that we understand that they are going through grief. Grief is, kids don't know how to handle grief. I've just lost my sister. I'm having to go to grief counseling myself to come to the unexpected death, even though we know just as sure as you're born, you're going to die. But
right.
Who expect it to happen when it's not expected? So same thing with kids, they grieve. They grieve that not being there. But, I've learned not to take it personally. And then I share with my grandfamilies to do the same thing. It's just an emotion. Anger is an emotion. So they take it out on us, and we get them in therapy, and we just try to let them know I'm here for you if you need me. And eventually what'll happen is your granddaughter begin to understand, Grandma and Papa, it's not their fault. They doing what they can, and I've got to stop, getting angry with them. And she'll realize through therapy how to uh, be appropriate with her feelings, because that's what it boils down to, is her feelings.
That is 100% right on. And our folks at home, I hope you caught that. That is just, Suzette just gave us a couple jewels there. Don't take it personally. And the grief is just an emotion. That really is it in a nutshell. They're grieving the loss. And when we have a loss, like you're saying, I'm very sorry to hear about your sister, you can't help but grieve, right? And how we process that is, Lord willing, if we can do that in a healthy way, we can come out of it on top and not hurt those around us, where sometimes the grands turn their guns on us and they don't mean it necessarily. They're just processing their grief.
And one thing I want to say, Craig, is we should allow everybody to grieve. Grieve, it's nothing wrong with grieving. As a matter of fact, grieving is healthy, because it's kind of like an upset stomach. I use that analogy. If you're not feeling good, and maybe once you regurgitate or do whatever, it's like, wow, I sure feel better. So that's the way grief is. That's the way we have to get it out. And a lot of times, depending on our grandchildren, it depends on their development. Most of them start grieving around pre-adolescent and adolescence, because then their brains begin to focus back on, why am I here? Why my mother's not here? Why my dad's not here? How did I get here? And all of these things. When they're younger, they don't focus on those things. But then later on, they begin to really think. And that has a lot to do with it. But grieving is a natural way to get things out. And we want them to grieve, but we want to teach them how to grieve.
And
even ourselves.
And so, Suzette, how do we teach our grands to grieve?
Well, first of all, we need help. I'm not a certified therapist or anything, even though I have a degree in psychology, but I go to trainings. and I go to different trainings that teach me how to deal with grief. I also I have friends that are therapists, and in Joya's therapy, my granddaughter, I'm a part of her therapy. And where she's getting counseling, I also can share that with her counselor and share with privately some of my emotions that I'm feeling. And I always say to families, I'm getting free counseling. So that's what you want to do, is you want to get a counselor that's going to be a family counselor, not just someone for the kids, but education. That's why I say learning is very important for all of us. Even though I'm 73, I'm continuously learning.
Right.
Every day. So going to educational trainings and all of that, and even in your community. And NAMI is one that I learned about mental health, because my granddaughter, not being able to understand that her mom rejection was a part of her mom's own mental health. I went to NAMI to better understand. Her mother looked at her sleeping as being lazy, her messy room as being lazy. I had just read a book about pre-adolescent depression, and I thought, no, that's not laziness, it's something else. And the situation I looked at in depth about, once one of her siblings had went and stayed with her mom, and she was not there, and she was wondering why did she choose her and not me? So, kids think like that. They think out the box. So with that being said, that's when I, during COVID, and COVID was a harsh time for everybody, but it was more in depth for our children. And they're still suffering today. That's why therapy is very important.
It's funny, Suzette. I was talking to one of our colleagues, Gail Engel from Colorado, who's one of the grand voices, and she said, we need to have a governmental movement where there is like this huge push on getting folks into psychology programs and seeing new behavioral health specialists coming out, because we have a behavioral health epidemic. And she would be singing harmony with you right now. We need to have therapy, and thank God it is not the negative thing that it was 10, 15 years ago, where we couldn't say, oh no, I can't tell Suzette about my therapy because she's going to think less. Now everybody knows this is such a vital part of our lives. And but what you've shared with our audience today is so powerful. When you don't know what your grands are doing, they may be grieving and they need space to grieve.
Yes.
And you need to be part of a family therapy program that is so great. And then to keep learning, this that this grieving process may be linked to depression, and you need to know about that. And
Exactly.
and pre-adolescent, and that is, wow, we are right in the pre-adolescent space, and
Are you?
it
Are
is,
you?
she's 10, going to be 11, and
Oh, yes.
it is right on time. But
Yeah.
but you are not only a big advocate for continuous learning, but you are also an adoption advocate, right? How did you get involved in that?
Well, my husband and I'm married to now for over 35 years. When we got married and I brought my birth daughter back up, we decided that we would go into foster parenting in Fulton County, which is Atlanta. So we did, and we just started out foster, had no idea we end up adopting 10 children. And those were not our intentions, okay? But they never went anywhere. And I kept saying, Lord, Lord, please let me help them. And I used to cheat and let them visit because I feel that children need connected. Now I cheated a little bit, didn't get caught. It was safe and all that. But I did used to let my kids visit some of the family, but DFACS was very open to that back then, partnerships and parenting.
Right.
So with that being said, we end up adopting the children. And I would say all of my kids, my youngest son is 9 girls and 1 boy. He was diagnosed. I have 3 that had family mental health backgrounds, but guess what? None of them, they're in their 30s, have shown any traits of it. And I did a lot of research on it. Let me tell you about grandparents. Our work does not stop. We have to look at the cause and effect of diagnosis that our children have. Yeah, you listen to what the doctors and the psychiatrists, psychologists say, but do your own research. Do your own research, because when it comes to depression, a lot of depression and all of that comes from stress. Just think about that stress. Stress brings on a lot of things. Not only does it affect us psychologically, it affects us physically too. It affects us physically. Sometimes children are obese because of all of this that's going on. They don't know how to crave their eating and things like that. But when we got our kids, we kept them actively involved in extracurricular activities. One daughter is a track runner. She went to the University of Tennessee on a full scholarship. Another one is a nurse. I told her, when you go to college, don't take all hard classes together. If it takes you 7 years to finish college, let it take 7 years. There's no limit on it. And they just went on. I am so proud of my children. I am so proud of them. They all have broken the generational curse, and now they're raising their own kids, and they are excelling. And we all are in contact except for 2. 2, the door is open, and it's always open, but they have to choose to walk through the door. I don't push that issue. So when they want to come back and want to talk or do whatever, then we'll do that. I'm open. My husband and I are open.
So I got to ask you about him, because he's got to be an amazing man. I mean, we've had a lot of folks on It's a Grand Life. I have not heard anybody say, we not only did we have fun with one adopted child, we've added 10 of them. But it really takes a partnership to do that. And 35 years is an outstanding testimony to the 2 of you being together, and God has really blessed you. That's amazing.
He sure has. And let me say, I have an awesome husband. I can't remember who made that song about the second time around is greater
Right.
or good. But that's that blues song. But I am so I would not even ask him when they called me to take in a child for foster care. I never asked for anything. I just said, what's the sex of the child? How old is the child? And can you give me a little history, like the background? And I say, bring them on. When he'll tell everybody today, I will walk in the house on different days and I would look and say, oh, hey, where this baby came from? And I'll say, oh, let me tell you. There was no repercussions from him at all. And let me tell you, he loves the story. He carries around his phone with the videos when we were on television here and all that. And I'd be like, oh my God, Charles, come on. Don't be showing it. They said, let him have his clout or whatever it is. Let him have it. But he has always been supportive. And he was also supportive with me. He was a cab driver when my kids need to go to baseball, track and field, band, and all that. All I had to do was say, Charles, we got to be here this time, this time, this time. But I did all the planning. And he's still like that today with our granddaughter. He's still like that today with her. And I'm just blessed. I'm blessed.
I can't imagine the driving to all the sporting events and the choir activities and the church activities.
Yes.
I mean, we have a challenge with one, and you had 10. And you're going to be just flooded with grandkids now. It's going to be, you're going to need just like to rent an auditorium or something to have your reunions. But it's amazing.
But you know what's so ironic? My children I don't have that many grandkids. I have my daughter that's now is a coach with the University of South Carolina. She's in her 30s. She doesn't have any kids yet. But they are more career and I kind of raised them to say, get whatever it is out your system. And then when you get ready to have kids, you'll be able to spend that quality time. And they love to tell stories now. See, that's a good thing about raising kids is when they get older, they come back and tell you stories you didn't even, they'll say, Mama had everybody in the house. We had all color. Everything was color coordinated. You couldn't leave out the house unless the bowls and clothes and everything matched. They raised their kids like that. Also, everybody had different color combs, because otherwise they'll be fighting over it. So organizational skills was a biggie for me. And it still is for my granddaughter. She just called me and said, Grandma, come and look what I did. She put lights all around her room. I said, oh, that's amazing. You were up at 1:00 this morning doing that? She said, yes. And then I'm getting ready to go I work part-time also, believe it or not, Craig. But, and I was getting ready to go. And she was like, no, I'm gonna stay here and clean my room up. I said, that's an awesome idea. That's an awesome idea. I have changed from raising my biological daughter to raising our children children that we adopted to raising my granddaughter.
Wow.
You can't raise kids all the same. It cannot be all the same. This generation now is so different. It is so different. I was telling a adopted parent yesterday that when it comes to power struggles with teenagers, I said, I take time out. Instead of going tit for tat, I'll say, okay, all right, okay, Joya, that's fine. And I'll go to my room. And then later on, she'll come and say, okay, Grandma, I'm going to listen to what you have to say now. I said, okay, are you going to listen? Okay.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Suzette, you said instead of giving your granddaughter a timeout, you took a timeout.
I take time out. You'll never win a battle with children, especially if it's a power struggle. They always, even if they are mumbling when they walk away from you, they're going to get the last word. They're going to get the last word. And when you say disrespect to me is not the disrespect that my parents had injected in me. Kids today feel like they have opinions, and they deserve to be heard, and they do. We should give them the opportunity to hear them out. And I just told one of my kinship parents, de-escalate, de-escalate, de-escalate. Let your granddaughter talk. Give her that respect. And she did. And every time I asked her granddaughter something, she would speak for her. I said to the grandmother, I am not speaking to you. I'm speaking to your granddaughter. And she was like, oh, I'm sorry, Miss Suzette. I'm sorry, Miss Suzette. I want to hear what she has to say. You know, it may not be correct, but she has a right to share how she feels.
Right.
And a lot of times we old schoolers, we don't see it. It's our way or the highway. Well, that needs to change. That needs to change. This is a different generation. We're in the 21st century now, and you're never going to win. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. The approach. That's another thing. You can say what our parents taught us, but it has to be in a different language. It has to be in a different approach. And you'll get a better response too.
That is brilliant. That is just 100% right. I mean, I'm a living proof of doing it 100% the wrong way. And you're saying, hey, it's not disrespect. They need to be heard. And our work is never done. And it's not disrespect. It's opinions. Oh man,
Yes.
is that good? And let it
And that
de-escalate.
doesn't just, yeah, and that doesn't come from us or from them. It comes from society. Society. You know, just like if a parent get a CPS
Right.
report, you know, we may think we're doing the right thing, but the CPS worker may say, no, this happened to me with my son. My son had his hand in my face, and I politely moved his hand out the way because he was diagnosed as bipolar but did not take any medication. And I politely moved it. Well, when the police came, I told them what had happened, and he and I got in a little tussle. And the officer said to me, well, you were the aggressor. I was like, really? She was like, yes, you put your hand on him first. I was like, oh my God. And she said it in front of him, and all he did was smirk, you know, with it. So we have to look at society. It's not just teachers, the same thing. We can teach our children respect in a respectful way and understand that that's what the ABA therapy did. Analytical behavior analysis therapy. It teaches us that you can see the same picture, but your outcome of how you interpret that picture can be different. And that's not saying one person is right or one person is wrong. And Joy and I took that together. We took that therapy together. Because she was the one, the kid, to say, I say the sky is blue. She said, no, it's not, it's gray. And I say, it's blue, Joy. No, it's not, it's gray. So we'll go tit for tat like that. So when we went through counseling, now she knows if I say it's blue, and if she says it's blue and I say it's gray, she'd be like, okay. We both say, okay, and we move on.
That's powerful. That's wonderful. Yeah. So it takes the conflict right out of the equation. And I've got a life coach that says,
exactly.
Why do we have to be right? We don't have to be right. You know, and that has taken me a long time to get there. But that's kind of what you're saying. It's blue, it's green, perfect. You know, it's
right.
But the de-escalation of the conflict is so powerful. But I want to ask you also, what has meant the most to you in your advocacy work for kinship caregivers and grand families? What has been the most significant?
The most significant, I would say, is partnerships. Because when you advocate, you meet people in different areas. And it's not because they're not doing what we feel they should do. It could be that they don't understand what we're doing. They don't understand. That's why lived experience is so important. And we don't have to just share. We can share the good, the bad, and the ugly, but we need to also let them know that what is happening, like kin care is the fastest growing set of caretakers in the United States now. So we need to let them know that there is an analogy, there is a fact behind that children do better with kin than they do in a home that they don't know anyone, because you keep that birth family connection. So when I'm advocating for a particular focus, but I'm also educating. Advocacy is educating too. So that's what we want to do. That's what I'm trying to do in Georgia with the legislators, because they don't get it. Some of them, I'll put it, not everybody, but some of them don't get it. They feel like being a relative or a kin, that we don't need any financial assistance.
That's crazy.
That's our duty.
Right.
Isn't it crazy? Isn't it crazy? It takes money to raise kids regardless. And we weren't just sitting here waiting for someone to knock on our door and ask us, are you going to take this child? We were getting ready to retire. We were getting ready to go on vacation. We were getting ready to do a lot of things. But out of the love for our kin, we wanted to stay connected. So that's why we brought our children in.
Yeah, that is so powerful. You know, as you know, from dealing with being on these calls with grand families and grandparents and kinship caregivers, many of the folks in our shoes have not planned for their own retirement. And now they get a call from the state, and here's 1 to 3 additional mouths that they are going to feed, and they're going to be concerned with their education and their future. And they didn't really even plan for their own, and they are in deep weeds. And boy, they certainly need support. If a foster family can get support, why can't some grand families and kinship caregivers that are in a tough financial situations? It absolutely breaks your heart. As you know from our work at Generations United, 18% of grand families and kinship caregivers are living in poverty, and so 1 out of 5.
Yes.
Of these families are really struggling. And I was on a call one time where there was a couple in their mid to late 70s that were raising a grandson or granddaughter, and they were over the moon that they got $100 gift certificate. And it was like they had won the lotto. And I said, that's great that you won the gift certificate, but it takes a lot more than $100 to raise these grandkids. And
that brings, and I just want to say this, Craig, that brings about another conversation as to why Each One Teach One Together, why I'm doing this, that is to try to assist families with electricity. I have a partnership with Fulton County, the LEAD program. I have a partnership with a clothing closet. I have a partnership with, I'm trying now to open up a food bank, and I have a partnership with the furniture bank. And I have a grandparent that her husband had retired from the military. She has 8 kids. The oldest is 12 and the youngest is 3. And it's all because her daughter had a mental health diagnosis. She receives a tiny bit of money with TANF, and that has to change. That has to change.
100%.
In Georgia, our governor don't want that extra federal money. And my goal as an advocate is to try to get him to look outside of the box as to the reason why we need that money for families like hers. But she calls, I got a furniture, electricity paid for. So that's why I do these things, because I know the struggles that we go through. And I'm sure you do too.
Absolutely. And I want to hear more, more about that. But why don't we put a pause in it for today? And then if you'll hang around, I want to talk about the specifics of the Each One Teach One Together and all the different layers of ministry that you're providing to the community. Would that be okay?
Sure.
So our guest today has been Suzette Brown from the Each One Teach One Together. Join us next week as we talk about the specifics of this phenomenal community development program that she's put together. And you may be encouraged to do this in your town, because each one can teach one together. And this is an outstanding African proverb. And also Paul talking to Timothy in the scriptures. It's got a strong basis and it works. And so, Suzette, thank you so much for being our guest. And we look forward to seeing you next week as we continue our discussion on It's a Grand Life.
Thank you, Craig. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today for It's a Grand Life. It's a Grand Life provides vital content, regulatory updates, and subject matter experts that are committed to supporting the 2.4 million kids and their caregivers from every neighborhood, every city, every tribe and territory nationwide. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts and leave a review. Every new subscriber and review helps us reach others that need assistance. As caregivers, we are united in purpose. We are driven by hope while providing strength for today and hope for tomorrow. We are truly making a difference while living the grand life. If you have a suggestion for a future episode, please reach out to us. But we'll see you next time for another It's a Grand Life. Thank you for joining us.